Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Discovery. We're very pleased to have you. My name is Alison Mostowich. I'm the Director of Engagement at Efficiency Canada. I am joining you from Calgary, Alberta, home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. While we're a remote workplace, Efficiency Canada is based at Carleton University, which is located in the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. So before we get started, just a reminder to everybody that we will have about 20 minutes of presentation and then we'll open the floor to questions. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and type them out there. You can also upvote those questions. So if you like a question, then there is a higher probability that your question will get asked. So I encourage you to look at the questions and upvote anything that you like. So without further ado, today I would like to welcome Laurna. I hope I pronounced your last name right, Strikwerda.
That's right.
Okay, perfect. So she is the Director of Project Development and Research at CAGBC, and she is here to talk to us about their new program that they just launched called Low Carbon Training. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Laurna.
Okay, great. Thank you, Allison, and I'm glad to be here with all of you today. I am going to go ahead and share my screen here with a brief deck, and this always gets a little tricky, so just bear with me for a minute, and I will share a PowerPoint and get it into the slideshow mode. Okay, all right, Allison, chime in if that's not working, but otherwise I hope everyone is seeing this in the correct format.
Yep,
so I
great.
will, okay. Awesome. I'll keep going. So this is an opportunity to introduce our new low carbon training program. First, I will also start with a land acknowledgement. I'm at the Canada Green Building Council, and I am located in Ottawa, which is on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. And we acknowledge that our relationships extend across Canada. The Low Carbon Training Program is funded by the Government of Canada's Sectoral Workforce Solutions Program. And I will also just note before I dive in more into the specifics of this program, I believe many people are familiar with the Canada Green Building Council, but for anyone who doesn't know us, we are a nonprofit industry association. We advocate and advance sustainable building across Canada. We have approximately 1,000 member companies that represent all aspects of the building industry. And we also support the LEED and zero carbon building certifications to advance technical standards and solutions for green building. So this program specifically is the Low Carbon Training Program. It's been in development since about December of last year, and we are launching now. So this grew out of really the realization of around Canada's climate commitments, which ask for significant carbon reductions by 2030 and 2050. And then specifically, we know that buildings account for about 17% of our emissions. And once we account for materials and construction, that goes up to 30%. And buildings are also one of the most effective, cost-effective ways that we can generate emission reductions. So what does that mean? That means new buildings being built zero carbon and existing buildings being retrofitted to zero carbon. So we completed a few years ago a roadmap to retrofits report, which estimated that large building retrofits can reduce building sector emissions by up to 51%. So while there are great efforts around smaller buildings, if we're focusing more specifically on large buildings, and in this program, we're really focusing on part 3 and industrial, commercial, high-rise residential, and other types of large buildings, because that's where we've identified the biggest gain in terms of emission reductions. So emission reductions from buildings are critical. There's a huge potential there, but we have to have the workforce needed to do that. So just a couple of years ago, we completed a market impact report, Canada's Green Building Engine, on direct green building jobs. So in 2018, when we measured that, there were about 500,000 individuals working in green building. That includes professions like architecture, engineering, construction, trades. So to reach our climate goals by 2030, we need about 1.5 million direct green building jobs. That means both growing the number of jobs, but also a conversion essentially from just a construction job to that can become a green building job if that project is focused on emissions reductions. So of course, as we grow the workforce, there are specific skills needed to advance green building. So as we developed the low carbon training program, we looked back at some of the research that we've done on what skills are needed for low carbon buildings and where are the barriers. So I've highlighted here 3 reports, 2 focused on the trades and specific low carbon building skills, and 1 focused on architects, engineers, and renewable energy specialists. So these identify some of the skills training need and the barriers, which I'll talk a little bit more about as we keep going, and new delivery models. So how do we close the skills gap? So 1, green literacy. We need a holistic view and a common nomenclature. So these are some of the key pieces that we looked at that really have formed the foundation for the low carbon training program. So we know that we need multiple building professions to have a common understanding of a building and what it does and how it can reduce emissions. So that's that holistic view, common and a shared vocabulary. So new training modes, convenient, affordable, and digital. So we are looking specifically at how we can make training more accessible, be integrated into the job and easy to do, and then also advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we know that to have the workforce we need for emission reductions, we have to grow the workforce, and the workforce has to become more inclusive. So we're also specifically looking at how we can make training work for members of equity deserving groups. So the low carbon training program, the collaborative approach. So here are our objectives: increasing knowledge and awareness of sustainability and low carbon core concepts for building professionals, increasing career opportunities for equity deserving professionals, and encouraging collaboration and a shared vocabulary around low carbon building concepts. So the process that we've used. So 1, we did a gap assessment to understand what low carbon skills are needed and where the barriers are. And then employer engagement to understand employer needs. And we also worked with EDI experts to ensure that programming is inclusive and accessible. And then we worked with a range of curriculum and subject matter experts to help develop the program. So just a little bit more in terms of the gap assessment and what we found. So we found there is quite a range of training opportunities, but there hasn't been a lot of work in cross-training across multiple professions and fostering that shared vocabulary. There are often sort of very specific, profession-specific opportunities, but what we're trying to do here is work across the sector. We're also trying to advance a basic sort of foundational literacy in emissions reductions for the building sector. We hope that through this program, professionals who haven't had a significant experience in this work will be able to start asking questions about energy efficiency and emissions reductions, that they'll have a better understanding of what other professionals are doing, that they'll be a little bit more empowered to start again, asking questions, raising points, and taking on hopefully new projects that are relevant for emissions reduction. So the audiences that we're working with are looking to engage the full range of the building sector. So from those who make decisions about buildings to those who design and construct, and those who are ultimately responsible for their performance. So given that focus, we are working with 5 major national partners. So if you, sorry, well, 6. So those are REALPAC, who works primarily with decision makers and building owners, the Canadian Construction Association with the construction sector, Royal Architectural Institute with architects. We are working with the Climate Risk Institute, which is also partnering with Engineers Canada to work with engineers, and then also with BOMA Canada to support building operators and managers. And then we also have 3 communications partners who are helping to disseminate information about the training, including Efficiency Canada. So what the training looks like, there's 2 components. So there's a foundations piece, which is 5 core modules, and those are highlighted here. This has been developed by CAGBC with input from all of our national partners, again, working to develop that shared vocabulary and shared understanding across the sector. So the idea is that these 5 modules can be done over the course of a day or 2 half days, and they include environment, social, and governance, the integrated design process, sources of carbon and an introduction to operational carbon, embodied carbon and materials, and transition planning to zero carbon. So this highlights a little bit more about what's covered in each of those modules. And this is meant to be accessible to any professional in the building sector. And then in addition, our partner organizations are developing more in-depth, specialized content that's takes some of those concepts and builds on them in a specific way for their own professional audience. So you can see the way that that's described here, and how those dive in a little bit more deeply into the specifics that are relevant for those professions. I've highlighted here just a few of the lessons essentially from our 3rd module, which focuses on the introduction to carbon in buildings and operational carbon. This highlights some of the specific components around energy efficiency. So we'll walk through a few of the slides and highlight a few of the topics that are covered. So one, highlighting just really those basic areas around operational emissions reduction and what's associated with those. So energy efficiency, switching to low carbon sources, and refrigerant leakages. And then opportunities to reduce operational carbon. So this highlights, I think, several of those ways that we can improve operational emission reductions. And again, we're aiming here to reach professionals who may not have a significant background in these areas, but to begin generating a more significant understanding around some of these really critical ways that we can reduce operational carbon. And so those are highlighted here. And then we also highlight the importance of energy efficiency and some of the specific ways that can be done. And then, dive in a little bit more into how that can work across teams and across different professionals. So we know, for instance, that if you need, as a building owner or a decision maker, you need to identify this as a priority. And so you need to understand the potential for emission reductions here. And then, of course, your architect, engineer needs to, to understand how this works, but also your building manager will need to understand how to actually use and make sure you get all of the benefits from these systems. So the idea, again, with this education is it's creating that shared understanding across the different professions. So registration and information, just this is a snapshot from the website, lowcarbontraining.ca. You can find information here on the core modules that are offered through the Canada Green Building Council, and you can also find information here on each of the partners' specialized content. I will just also, I'll note here that we'll have more live events happening January through March, and we'll be updating information through this link. A couple of our partners have started delivering specialized content, and so I think there is a REALPAC training next week. I believe they probably have closed registration for that, but we've had really significant interest in that. The project will end March 31st, 2024. So there will be opportunities for more virtual trainings in November and December, and then January through March, there will be opportunities for webinars, and we are also aiming to do a few in-person events in Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton. The core modules will be available on demand. Those foundational modules will be available on demand, and that will be launching within the next week. And they will also be offered in a live webinar format in December, and then at a few points from January through March. So I hope this has been a helpful overview, and would encourage you just to share information about the training and just put the website into the chat so that it's easy to find as well. And then I look forward to some questions, and hopefully to more individuals being able to take the course. These are some of the results that we're aiming to achieve, hoping to reach 3,000 participants and 100 employers. And then the creation of our 5 core modules plus specialized training. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurna. That was really helpful. I'm hoping we can dig into some of the details, and we've definitely got some great questions in the background. Okay, let's maybe start with, I kind of have an existential question about this. So when you were thinking about building this training, I totally agree. I think it's so critical to have this common lexicon. And I think we're entering into a space where this is going to be, for lack of a better term, unavoidable in building situations, especially when you think about the building codes that are upcoming. And the building codes that we're seeing are increasingly including emission reduction, embodied emissions, things like that. So I'm curious, as we sort of look at that as the framework, what would you say the benefit to professionals are? I heard a lot about CAGBC's objectives, and I think those are, we're helping to try to meet those. But when you're thinking about sort of the different groups that you're marketing this to, what is the benefit for them, and what would they get out of it?
Sure. So I think the benefit that we would see is the opportunity to be able to take on new building projects. So, and I think we are starting to see now, especially with the policy environment, for instance, government is beginning to prioritize emission reduction opportunities in their procurements. And so I think the industry is starting to shift that way. And so being able to, to understand and to start to work on more low carbon projects can, create opportunities for employers, and then also for employees as well. So I think there is, definitely that opportunity specifically. And then I think it's also about the opportunity to be able to connect and understand your work in the context of climate change and climate action specifically. And construction, the building sector, decision makers, they all, we all have an opportunity to play in climate action. And so I think that's also that's part of the opportunity too.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. And then, so when it comes to the different, like I was just sort of thinking as you were talking that, and it's a pretty big audience that you're aiming this towards, and it sounds like there is some specialization. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of seems like the core modules would be great for people that are just kind of getting into this and thinking about maybe transitioning their business model to deliver more energy efficient or at least more sort of green, quote unquote, services. And then there is specialization for people who are further into the sector. So how does this work for people that are kind of new versus people that have been doing this for a really long time? Like, is there benefit to everybody there?
Yeah, so I think certainly the core modules, we are really aiming to reach beyond the choir of those who have taken a lot of low carbon training before. So that really is meant to reach some new audiences, and it really is meant to be that kind of foundational sort of awareness, basic skills that you can build on. And then our partners are developing more specialized content that I think would be, something that either those who have a little bit more background on low carbon or who are a little bit more, sort of both, I think both early to mid professionals, but I think that then, they would benefit more from that. But I think for the CAGBC foundational content, it is meant to be very accessible and again to sort of to reach those who have not necessarily had low carbon training before.
Fantastic. So I'm going to get to the questions in the chat. Lori has asked some really good questions, and I might bring these up a bit of a level, Lori, because I think you asked some really good sort of like foundational questions. So she's mentioning the Canadian Home Builders Association, and if you're planning on reaching out to them. So that's sort of one part of the question. But then the other part is, I think right now there is a narrative and probably a false narrative that green building is too costly and that it is a burden. So I'm curious if that's part of the different modules or how, CAGBC is addressing that. So kind of two questions in there.
Okay. Well, so just, I think, we'd be definitely happy to talk with the Canadian Home Builders Association. We have geared this more to the part 3 sector and sort of larger buildings, but I think there are, certainly aspects of it that would be relevant across both types. And then the other question was around green building affordability and the cost. So it's a great question. I think so. We have CAGBC we did some research on the cost for zero carbon buildings, and we found that really there is a pretty modest upfront cost, and then there is a significant payoff. I will find the link before we're out and put that in the chat that's making the case for zero carbon buildings. So I would highlight that. I think there's also some important context here where, again, we're going to see some changes to the national model building codes that's coming up in 2025, and there's already in a lot of municipalities and provinces there are building codes that push energy efficiency and even now in some cases reductions in embodied carbon. So it will start to become more just how we do business, and I think that will grow. And then I think, also we need to be looking ahead because there will be impacts from climate change, and we have an opportunity now, to work on mitigation. And I think, that's really critical and something that we have the chance to do now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And maybe I'll just take this point to mention, if anybody is interested in building codes, I say that, and this would probably be the only crowd that would ever be interested in building codes. But they did just open public consultation for the new national model building codes that are going to be released for 2025. So if you need any guidance on how to participate in that public consultation, there was some information in our newsletter that just went out. I'm sure you can reach Laurna. You can reach out to us as well. We're happy to share how to partake in that public consultation if you can't find it on your own. So feel free to reach out. And So I think this is actually a good point to maybe ask this question. The focus of the courses, are they on new builds, or is it sort of more retrofit project activity? Is there, or maybe there's a balance in the courses?
Yeah, so there is a balance. I think in our core, the CAGBC sort of foundational modules, we were aiming to cover both of those. A little bit more focus on the new construction, especially because especially building owners are often, thinking that through. You have more opportunities, of course, with a new build to sort of, to do it right and to, do it low carbon from the very beginning. But we are aiming to cover both of those areas in the courses.
Excellent. And then how about resilience and adaptation? Can you share a little bit about how that features in the different modules?
So we are really focusing on mitigation here. That said, I will certainly make a plug, especially for engineers in the audience, that Climate Risk Institute, I think, does cover a little bit more around that with some of their specialized content and in other work that they do. So I think it is really critical to have an understanding of mitigation in the built environment, because of course we're going to have to shift to look more at resilience and adaptation just because of the nature of extreme weather events that are going to be coming. But as we do that, there are sort of high carbon intensity ways that we can deal with adaptation and resilience, and then there are ways that can also support mitigation at the same time. So if we're looking at things like green roofs or vegetation around buildings that can capture rainwater, that can be a mitigation source at the same time. Looking at trees instead of only focusing on on air conditioning, but also thinking about, are we doing triple glazed windows? Are we looking at improving the building envelope? So there really are ways that we can think about both of those. So I think it's critical as we look at adaptation to also have that mitigation understanding.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you. Okay, so just going back to one of Laurie's questions she asked, and maybe I'll again bring this up to an upper level. Are you guys connecting with any of the colleges? I know there's sort of this, I can't remember the name of it, but it's this, there's a sort of a collection of colleges for resiliency. So
yep.
Are you working with colleges or sort of these different educational institutions?
So Canadian Colleges for a Resilient Recovery, or C2R2, is a great organization, and we do definitely, we chat a lot, and they have supported some of our other projects. So for our work here, we're really focusing on early to mid-career professionals, so reaching those in the workforce or maybe who are just entering the workforce. So this is absolutely open to students, but I think it will be mostly professionals, and we are partnering with professional associations. So for instance, the RAIC and BOMA, REALPAC tend to have more professionals in their membership. So I think this complements the work of C2R2. They also are advancing programming under the same source of funding to provide micro-credentials through their colleges. So I'll make a plug for that program as well. So there's sort of two sides of the same coin. If you're a student, it's Quick Train Canada. They have some resources for students, and then we hope that we're reaching that sort of early to mid-career professional audience through this program.
Great, excellent, thank you. Okay, Ted has a question and has background information that I don't have because I don't really understand this question, but I will ask it, and maybe you will. So how are you thinking to deal with interprovincial accreditation? And he's thinking specifically about the ability of professionals to train in one province and then work in another.
So yeah, that's a great question. I think, so for this project specifically, we offer a certificate of completion for completing the CAGBC modules, and then some of the partner organizations, and it's sort of case by case, but some are offering continuing professional education credits that are relevant to that specific profession. So we're not necessarily addressing that issue of training in one province and moving to another. However, I think that it's a really critical question to think about. That, again, I don't know that we can address it through this project, but I think it's, especially as we see some provinces adopting more, climate focused building codes, I think it will be, it'll be critical for the different professions to think about. And I hope that through this, we are contributing to that, again, that sort of basic foundational literacy, that there can be ways to build on from other organizations.
Yeah, it's a complicated topic, that's for sure. Multi-sector and multi-stakeholder. Okay, so you mentioned that the courses are going to be available till March 31st of next year. Really good question. Will they be available, sort of these on-demand ones, will those be available following March 31st?
So yeah, so everything is available to Canadian trainees for free. Both the core content and the specialized content is available for free through March 31st, 2024. And then after that time, we will be looking at sort of the next steps and the plan B, and how we can continue to hopefully make the content available.
Right, that is important information. So if anybody is online from an association, make sure you mention that when you share this training, that it is free right now. Okay, let's see. So just a question, kind of going back to what's in the programs and knowing that potentially the model building codes in 2025 could incorporate embodied carbon. Is that a component of the training right now, embodied carbon?
So we do have one module in the foundational CAGBC modules on materials and embodied carbon. And so that provides, again, that introduction. So what is an environmental product declaration? What are the high sources of embodied carbon? How do you reduce that? And how do you think about both embodied carbon and operational carbon in a building? So yes, that's definitely covered.
Perfect. And then we actually had quite a few people upvote this question. Just wondering, how the programs could be relevant for municipal staff working on decarbonizing buildings.
So I think it's definitely relevant for municipal staff because they have owners or asset managers, they have architects, engineers, they have building managers and construction professionals. So yeah, I think it's absolutely relevant. And if there's a specific municipality that are that's, and you're in the audience, we would definitely be happy to chat further about, if there's a way that we could offer a webinar to help sort of reach your specific audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Okay, and then just a question about if people are sort of taking the courses and they see gaps, is it appropriate to maybe reach out to you and talk about like what gaps exist, different training opportunities that are available? Just some thoughts on that.
So sure, yeah, I think we know that there's a lot that we had to leave out because, again, we were working on that sort of foundational information and trying to create content that could be done in a day. So yes, be happy to hear from anyone where on a gap, and if you have sort of recommendations, because there's always a need to continue education. So yeah, certainly happy to talk further.
Right. Okay, and then related to delivery, so for the on-demand segments, is there a moderator discussion guide to aid classroom type use?
So we've developed the on-demands, which are basically self-paced. So that would be the learner would, you'll be able to sit in front of your computer and just, do it at your own pace. In addition to that, we have developed PowerPoints and facilitator guides that can be used for a live webinar or an in-person event with an instructor. So we hope to advertise the opportunity for those webinars soon. We'll probably do maybe one in December, and then most will be January through March. But there will be opportunities for live webinars with an instructor.
Fantastic. And those facilitation guides that you were mentioning, is it sort of a train the trainer initiative? Like these could be delivered by someone else?
So we did do a train the trainer exercise with instructors from our partner organizations. I think we generally, I think the next phase we will be focusing more on direct training, and
Right.
so be sharing that. But I guess you've got the wheels turning about maybe a potential sort of a second project. So I think, we could potentially expand that, but I think the next
Yeah.
phase will be more of that direct training.
That would be cool. I could see it might be interesting about how that would help an organization bring it inside and deliver it and like make the business case for that. So I could see that being really cool. Something to think about down the road, anyways. So Stephen has a question about sharing with organizations. It sounds like he might be part of a network that could share this. So I guess just wondering how they get information to promote through their networks, how far in advance they can get it. I would just say maybe, Stephen, that I think everything is available right now and the timing of when you share is kind of open. So if people are part of networks, how would they share this information with their network? Are there sort of tools available for them to share with their networks?
So yes, I mean, well, so we have obviously the link. I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat here, and I'll do, just since my name is long, I'm also going to do projects@cagbc.org. So we are also looking for groups, especially industry associations, that might want to share this out a little bit more widely to their networks. So, and we have a package of communications assets that you can use. So that includes some, sample social posts, some images to make it easy to do. So please feel free to send me an email, and if you would like to be, added into that group, we can certainly share that information. And I think so. I just saw a comment that you're not able to copy the chat, but so if you email projects@cagbc.org or even info@cagbc.org, you can mention the low carbon training program and it will get to me.
And that is a good reminder to me to get in there and make sure. I'll have to figure out how to enable that on Zoom. I did not know that was not enabled. I apologize, everybody. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our questions. I'm going to maybe ask a couple more and then we will close this out and we will have a wonderful weekend, I'm sure, all of us. So this is a great question, especially when you're mentioning. So are there any programs specifically to First Nation communities, or are there any sort of components of this program that would be specific to First Nation communities?
So I think we have one set of content that we don't necessarily have customized content, but we certainly would welcome sharing it directly with First Nations communities as well. So if there's an opportunity to do that, we'd absolutely appreciate that. And I think certainly there would be I would love in a second project with a greater runway to sort of think about how this could be customized. But so at this stage, I think, we have the modules, and, if you're in a First Nations community and this is something that we could deliver, then, we'd love to talk further.
Yeah, that sounds like an excellent second project. Okay, so final question. If people had to walk away remembering one thing today from this presentation, what would it be?
I think the simplest piece is just go to lowcarbontraining.ca and register, and then so maybe that's an action step. And the sort of bigger picture piece, I think, is that everyone in the building sector can participate in climate action.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. This has been recorded and we will post it probably in about a week to 2 weeks time. And you can find that on our YouTube channel. So if you look up Efficiency Canada YouTube, you should be able to find this presentation and all of the previous presentations that we've done on discovery. And thank you so much, Laurna, for joining us today. That was a great presentation and your answers were excellent and very informative. So we wish you all the best with this program. And, obviously we're here to help. So we will try to disseminate this as much as possible. And have a great weekend, everybody. Happy Friday.
Okay, thank you. Happy Friday, everyone.
Take care.